Tonight's guest is one that I'm really excited about. So excited, actually, that I thought I could have sworn we've done an interview before. I had this whole speech prepared about how this is our second time doing this, and it turns out it's the first. So how about you give a warm Comics Are Dope welcome to Mr. Brandon Montclaire. How's it going, sir?
Hello. Well, I'm doing all right, and like I thought we had done this before too. So and maybe it just got gobbled up by the internet, you know.
Maybe. I think what it was that we met at New York Comic Con. We were supposed to do
Oh,
an
okay.
interview, and then something happened, and I was like, but maybe we can do something in New York. And I think we saw each other, exchange pleasantries, but never actually did this thing online.
Okay. Well, then it's going to be all brand new, all different.
All new, all different. I want to give a shout out. Well, first, I guess I should tell you guys why we are here. We are here in celebration of Brandon's run on Ducktales for Dynamite Comics, which, ran 12 issues. I've got 11 of the 12 here. I don't know where my issue 1 is, but I just finished shuffling stuff around. So I'm glad I have even those with me. But
Right.
those 12 issues are about to be collected for the first time in a paperback or an oversized hardcover that you can get via Kickstarter. Thanks to Dynamite Entertainment, they're actually bringing back not just Brandon's run of DuckTales, but every run of DuckTales from the OG Gladstone publishing days to the Disney comics to the Boom and IDW era, and Brandon's run. And I think I covered them all. There are 5 volumes collecting 5 different runs of DuckTales, and they are all available right now at comicsaredope.com/ you guessed it, DuckTales. So you'll be able to get your hands on these. And like I said, I thought we had done this interview back when your run had first started or was just about to start. And I remember going into it not really knowing what to expect. I'd grown up like a Disney afternoon kid, but my favorite Duck comic or Duck thing was Darkwing. So huge Darkwing Duck fan. But when DuckTales came on, I loved the theme song, but I felt like the show was a bit slow, so I wasn't as tapped in with DuckTales. It wasn't until, later, as like 2 or 3 years ago, where I discovered these Disney Afternoon Adventures books that Fantagraphics was putting together, where they're reprinting all these, diverse, different Disney Afternoon stories. So it's not just Darkwing, but it's DuckTales, Chip and Dale, Rescue Rangers, the Gummy Bears, like all of it. And they're collections of stories that are from different parts of the world. They're translated into English sometimes. Sometimes they were in English the whole time, but you never saw them as DuckTales or whatever form. They were like in different anthologies and stuff like that. And it was through that I was like, okay, I like the DuckTales in comics form. And that got me into some of the more OG Uncle Scrooge and Donald comics and all of that. And so by the time your run came around, I was like, okay, I've read some of this classic stuff. What's the new going to bring? And what I loved about the early issues of the run was that it kind of paid tribute to all of that. Like those books very much feel like an episode of, DuckTales, but without the, pixelization. Like somebody did some cool upscaling on that art, right? But in there were these excerpts where it's like Scrooge is telling the story of how Duckburg came together, and
Right.
it kind of takes the form of like a classic Karl Barks or Don Rosa story,
Right.
complete with a slight change in art style and everything. And it was like, oh, okay, this is like the perfect primer for a brand new DuckTales fan, but it's also great for a classic fan. So that very long intro was my way of bringing up this question, right? Like, what
Right.
was it about DuckTales that drew you in?
Well, I'll try. I'll probably be longer than the question even answering it because I could go on and on about it. But I was just a kid when it came out, but it still seemed too kid, like, I would be more of a G.I. Joe fan or
Mhm.
He-Man fan or the more obscure stuff. I always say Galaxy Rangers, I loved Inhumanoids, I loved all that cool stuff. And so, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I remember, I was a comic fan my whole life. So even though they're impossible to get, there were it was the four turtles slicing up ninjas in sewers and doing cool stuff. It wasn't cowabunga and pizza.
Right.
So DuckTales back then, I watched it because you watch everything. I watched Gummy Bears. I watched all that stuff. But I can't say that I identified it with it as a kid. Um, and then, now though, all these years later, I realize how good it is and how much it holds up. Not to take anything away from He-Man, but
Right.
I don't know that I think DuckTales was a better made show. But then, I was approached by Nate Cosby, the editor, to do something with Disney because of my Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur stuff. They liked something more all ages rather than just kids and something that could appeal to everyone. And that's kind of what I want to do. And we were going to discuss, the different available Disney properties, but he mentioned DuckTales and I immediately went for it, more so because of the Uncle Scrooge connection,
Mm.
because just again having been in comics my whole life, I don't know when I discovered the Carl Barks stuff, but at least 20 years ago, so as an adult. And it is as good as advertised. I really liked all the Carl Barks stuff. But I also respected that we were doing Uncle Scrooge. It was going to be DuckTales. I definitely respect the commerciality of it because I have two daughters. I have one who's just turned 17, and another one who's just turning 10. And, so people in their classes know I work in comics and they always think it's cool to some extent. But you talk to like a random parent on a pickup line for a fourth grader and they find out you do DuckTales, they start singing the song. It's so ingrained that even though as comics professionals, you think of Carl Barks and you think of the professionalism of it, you think of what an influence all that Carl Barks stuff had on George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. And then they make Indiana Jones, and then Indiana Jones winds up having a huge influence on DuckTales, and it's kind of perfect circle.
Right.
But no, I just the popularity and the longevity of DuckTales, which is I guess now 40 years next year. It's the 40th
Yeah.
anniversary.
80, yeah, it was 87.
Yeah, 87, and it was just like I said, it was really cool. I mean, they it was from the beginning going to be set in the 1987 continuity.
Mm.
So which and I had never seen the reboot until until after I was on this book. So let me just check it out. But it said no, you can't use it. But I said just look at it, and it's a really well done cartoon, but they change a lot of stuff, and that's sometimes what you have to do. But to me, it's like Uncle Scrooge and Huey, Dewey, and Louie are such great characters. And I did Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur where I created Moon Girl, and I've done independent books, and I've gotten to do my own thing. So just to do a classic character, it's like, what's your take on Uncle Scrooge and Huey, Dewey, and Louie? Well, he's the richest guy in the world, and he just wants to. He'll do anything it takes to get a little bit more money.
Right.
And the three boys look up to him as their hero. It's like it's just it's so fun to do, and I don't need to put my own spin on that character. It's like if you asked me what's my pitch on the Incredible Hulk, it's like a perfect character. Well, so it's a scientist who gets angry and he blacks out and he doesn't know what he did. You know what I mean? And
Right.
and everything that happens. And then it's of course there's complexities and everything, but it was just really great to work on something that was so in my mind well conceived. And that's a huge universe, so it's impossible to get everybody in. But I certainly I certainly tried to do it. Yeah, it was just a lot of fun, and I was kind of schizophrenic in a sense on it because those first five issues are one big story,
Mhm.
and we do the flashbacks, and that's it. You're right, in the old Carl Barks style. We even changed the coloring and the old and the grid layouts, the 8 panel grid layouts. And then after that, I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to make them like episodes now. Just the next 7 stories are standalone stories.
Yeah.
So you can kind of go in any order. I was kind of wondering like, oh, which one's going to do which ones are people going to respond to more? And I came out, I grew up on monthly comics and going to the comic shop or going to the newsstand and getting all this stuff in single issues. But with my recent work, it's been so heavily for the book market and collected editions and everything else. I'm super excited for it to be collected. And like you said, through the Kickstarter, they're going to get all 12 in March. Last I heard, though, they're doing just like a regular mass market edition of the first 6, and that'll be out in the fall.
Mhm.
So I'm really excited because that's where I think a lot of my readers are going to find it, and then I'll get that feedback from it too. So
Yeah.
it's just been like I said, I told you I could give you a long answer, so
Yeah.
that's
No.
I'll cut it there though.
Speaking of your readers, I want to give a shout out to my friend and coworker Emily of Fight or Flight Comics. When she got into comics, I want to say she said she was in high school, maybe late middle school, is when you were doing Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. And so that was among her first Marvel stories. It was that and Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, and kind of like the sort of all new, all different era.
Right.
But yeah, she just wanted me to tell you that she really loved Moon Girl, Devil
Yeah, I
Dinosaur.
really appreciate it. Moon Girl was a great book to work on, and getting to create Moon Girl with Natasha Bustos and also Amy Reeder, we thought we'd get like 6 issues, although then they said no, we'll do 12. That was a funny book because they said, hey, Scholastic book fairs specifically. So so they want a new Marvel book. They want it to be in continuity. So like somehow somebody at Scholastic knew what's up, like knew the lingo. So they don't want like just a kid's version of the books. They want it to count. They want it to be part of the Marvel universe, but kid appropriate. And so, we decided to do Devil Dinosaur, and then Devil Dinosaur became Devil Dinosaur and Moon Girl, and then became Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. And in that process, that was going to really launch as even though it was single issues, the real purpose of it was to put it into the book fairs and have it available that way. And then like while our book was like just about to come out, someone at Scholastic said, hey, let's pull in Squirrel Girl because we like that. And that was already ongoing before ours. So they put Squirrel Girl out, they put our book out, they tried it with Wasp. Ms. Marvel was kind of a different path, but Ms. Marvel was the first book that set up Marvel doing anything like that. So it was, again, if you're a collector, pick up every single issue of Moon Girl. You can, because I think it might have the lowest print run of any ongoing series in Marvel history as a single issue, but it sold so well as trades. And, the way it was explained to me by a lot of the people at Marvel was, you have, let's say, an A-lister like Spider-Man, and then you have somebody maybe not as popular like Hawkeye. And, of course, there's exceptions, but everyone who reads Hawkeye or reads a Vision miniseries or Wonder Man or anything like that, they're probably all Spider-Man readers. But the readers who read Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, by and large, that was like the only Marvel book they were reading. And it was an entryway into comics for a lot of people, and especially superhero comics. And I think, comics the Marvel way, such that it is. So yeah, so your friend is just Moon Girl last year was the 10th anniversary. And it goes by fast, and it also goes by incredibly slow, because life before Moon Girl is kind of like life before kids. It was a different world.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Speaking of anniversaries, yesterday was 15 years since the debut of Miles Morales. And it's just like, I was watching a video, somebody just talking about how much that character meant to him. Just, being able to, the fact that he was biracial, so like seeing himself in that character meant a lot. I had the pleasure of interviewing both Stephanie Williams and Asia Simone, who were the creative team on, ironically, a Scholastic original graphic novel of Moon Girl, Devil Dinosaur around the time of that animated show they did. And they both just talked about just how much it meant to see Lunella, being proud to be smart, to be inquisitive, to be adventurous, and how that represented something for them, as young Black women that are just like, we don't see this, we don't see ourselves in this media often. And I think that sort of perfect storm of, visual representation, but also like having a character that feels like a real person, that feels like someone that you may know. And then for that to be introduced, like you said, in book fairs and places that are not like the typical comic shop experience. They don't always feel so exclusive or exclusionary at times. Yeah, I think that kind of all just created the perfect storm that made Moon Girl such a hit and success. But it doesn't, none of the success happens if you don't put, pen to paper or start typing a script to say, hey, let's do it like this. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. And, you don't plan for it to ever be important, anything, in any way, or a big hit, a success, or there for it to be a cartoon. I think if you do as a creator, it can spook you, and it can make you do things that instead of just saying a good character and a good story, she's smart because Marvel characters are scientists. She's called Lunella Lafayette because Marvel characters have alliterative names. She has a problem though. They all have the feet of clay. So to me, the trick was always writing her as, okay, well, how is the smartest person on earth going to continue to make mistakes and make dumb decisions? You know what I mean?
Mm,
And then, but then if you pull that back, the process too much, it's like, oh no, you're talking about my hero. And then, it's like, so when you talk to fans, sometimes you have to really respect that the characters mean so much to them. And, as much as it takes me putting, pen to paper, or like you said, typing up something, and Natasha putting it on the page and drawing, and everyone else who worked on that book, from Chris Robinson, the editor, to Tamara Bonvillain, the colorist, and Travis Lanham lettered every single page, and we had great guest artists like Gustavo Duarte and Aletha Martinez and Ray Anthony Height. That book, everybody had a lot of fun doing it and putting it all out there. But at the same time, if the fans don't pick it up and respond, if the fans don't buy the next issue, and not even to make it commercial, if the fans don't care, and if they're not kind of putting those characters in their head and telling their own stories and filling the gaps in between the panels and saying, oh man, one day, if I was, if you're an aspiring comic writer, one day I'll do it, and this is how I'll do that story. Or if you're just a fan, wouldn't it be cool if that kind of story came with Lunella? It really is, without the readership, it doesn't go anywhere either. So it's a nice system that comics, and I guess all of the arts and media, have worked out.
for sure. So something you said earlier, you talked about how with Moon Girl and also with DuckTales, like you're attracted to doing all ages stories as opposed to stories for kids.
Right.
Why do you draw that distinction? Because a lot of times when I hear all ages, I think kids. And why is it important to tell stories that are like accessible to everyone?
Yeah, well, it's just my personal interest, So there's certainly, you can tell stories just for adults. I mean, I was an editor at Vertigo for a long time. When I was a kid, if I was dreaming at 11 years old, it wasn't to do Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and it wasn't to do DuckTales. It was to do Wolverine, and maybe he'd meet the Punisher in the sewer again and start shooting each other. Punisher will shoot him in the face a few times with the Uzi, and go on. I mean, so it's but as far as all ages goes, I've really come to appreciate it for a lot of different reasons. But one of the reasons I make the distinction to get to the root of the question you're asking is because you also have a whole business, or a whole, I don't want to call it a genre, but a whole approach to young readers as like, hey, let's make sure it makes the parents happy. It's something to buy, and again, there's nothing wrong with making a book that sells and people buy. But to me, it's so much more fun to be able to do a book that the kids like, and maybe their parents aren't quite sure, or maybe or maybe the parents who are totally permissive, love reading it, and there's stuff that goes over the kid's head. I mean, you can watch. I don't know. I've never seen Teletubbies, so I don't know. But I assume you can watch Teletubbies and you can really enjoy it if you're a little kid. But to me, it's more interesting to do something like The Simpsons, or something even like the old Warner Brothers cartoons, where it works on different levels, and everyone can read it. And you have to make stuff that's cool and fun and not so didactic, and not so, oh, let's give a lesson, and let's make it moral, and let's make these people perfect role models and everything else. To me, it's just not as interesting, and I don't think stories like that are necessarily as long living. So I definitely try to approach with the all ages stuff, and I've come to really appreciate the all ages stuff. Not that anyone's asking me to write Wolverine, and but it's I have two daughters, like I said, and just with them, and then just the kid, the kid, their friends that they come around. And my older daughter's 17, so Moon Girl started when she was 6 or 7 or something like that.
Mm.
And it's just you get readers who actually read the comics and love the comics. It's I definitely know what it's like to see something on the shelf that's so cool. Let's grab it, and it goes in your pile. And oh, that's a variant cover by my favorite artist, so I'm going to pull that, and it goes in your pile. Or the omnibus, and I'm guilty of this too. Oh my God, the omnibus is 75% off at this place. It's they got it, so I should have that just to put on my shelf, and it stays wrapped. I'm pretty good about not doing that type of stuff, but there's so little. It's almost. I think it's safe to say there's none of that when you're working with material for younger readers, because they read it, they take it, they fold it, they put it in their pocket, they read it later, they want the second one. They're yanking on their parents' sleeve to get the next issue or what's going to happen. And it's such a great readership. And I was an editor, as I mentioned, at Vertigo. I also worked at DC. I was an assistant editor on All Star Superman, and I bring this up a lot, specifically because, and All Star Superman, as assistant editor, it was, oh, Grant Morrison wrote this, and send it to Frank Wiley, and send it to the colors. You're not telling those guys how to tell that story. But that's, won a ton of Eisners. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. It's a great story. And again, I'll repeat myself, but 40-year-old Brandon loves All-Star Superman, but not as much as 11-year-old Brandon loved West Coast Avengers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and not to disparage West Coast Avengers, but it's like it's something so special about the stuff you've grown up with, sticks with you for the rest of your life. And it's I think that's great, and you can really appreciate new music or new film or new comics. But I think the stuff that you loved at 12 is the stuff that you fill your room with, when you can afford a room and cool shelving and some nice tchotchkes.
Yeah,
So yeah,
for sure.
and yeah, so that connection means a lot to me. And I don't know that I would get that if my path was saying, oh, you're going to do they're going to relaunch Captain America again, and Brandon would be good on it. I'd love to do that stuff because I grew up on it also. But like I said, to target a kid audience, I'm very happy to be able to say that I can do that.
Yeah, I think, for me, I'm 35, 36. I can't lose track. But I got a 16-year-old, and then I got two more that are under 5, all girls.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting to see the things they gravitate toward.
Mm.
With my younger two, it's just kind of, hey, whatever's around, right? Like my 5-year-old's very much into Bluey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those examples of like an all ages property, because
Sure,
we'll sit and watch Bluey and I don't get tired of it. It's like we're watching two different shows.
Yeah.
Like, there's the one episode, I don't know why it comes on so often, but it's the one where they're like on FaceTime with her cousin, and they're like, she's like running around
with a point of view of the of the screen. Yeah. I know it too. It's great stuff.
Right. And so but it's like that is going on, and the kids are just laughing and like going crazy or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's like a whole parenting lesson going on behind them, and like my 5-year-old isn't catching any of that. She's just running around screaming in cowboy hat. And there's something magical about being able to speak to multiple audiences through the same work. And, I'm assuming that as a creative, you're putting sort of Easter eggs in. You don't know if it's going to work. I guess that by the time you have a TV show, maybe there's a test audience or something. It's like, okay, yeah, it landed with this 5 people. But I just think it's magical to be able to create something that does that.
Yeah, my approach to writing, and it takes time. Not that other people rush or not do it. It's for me hard to do, but it's what makes it worth doing. It's to have a book that you can read and reread and reread is kind of is philosophically what I would like to produce. So then over the years I figure out, well, how do I produce that? And it's all the tricks of the trade that you put in there, but you just have to to put something in layered, you can run a risk, because then if you're too all over the place, and the Easter eggs are too much of a distraction, it doesn't even seem like, oh, these are Easter eggs. It just seems like the story's not making too much sense, and it doesn't flow right. And you can tend to overwrite. And I think I still, even now, I try not to. I do overwrite sometimes, but yeah, it's when I did the Ducktales stuff, it was always with an eye of just an adventure, because that's what you have to do, and then you don't have a lot of pages to do it. Some cool visuals, right? So to me, it's very important to set up an artist for success. And I don't know that, and I'm not an artist at all, but I learned working at DC, reading scripts by Frank Miller, reading scripts by Matt Wagner, that that you have to make something visually interesting, and that's important. And then when you do that, you have to give it enough room, and that means you're going to even have shorter time and lesser time to kind of to pontificate, or be, or do all this stuff. But I definitely try to make it a story, to craft it such that it's with DuckTales, the adventure, the cool visuals, a monster, a bad guy, a favorite guy, a favorite a supporting character that comes back. But it's really, you got to give stuff heart. And I got to do that for 1,000 pages on Moon Girl, and bringing that to DuckTales. It's I grew up with brothers and male cousins, and and friends, and we all liked, like I said, we enjoyed Wolverine and everything on Batman and stuff like that. But having two girls was really foreign to me. And then you see, like, I say, hey, watch this old episode. My older daughter woke up in the middle of the night once, 15 years ago, or so it has to be now. And she's like, I want, she couldn't go back to sleep, and she wanted to watch something. And that's a recipe for disaster. So I said, okay, we'll watch this old episode of the A-Team, because it was streaming someplace. And I said, oh, she'll be bored by it. And she wasn't bored by it. She kind of liked it, but then she would talk about it, and she was just a toddler at the time, and say, oh, who's your favorite member of the A-Team, right? So that'd be an interesting perspective. And she just said the one girl that was in that one episode, like, who was, kind of, she wasn't quite a damsel in distress, but it was, the one that they had to help and everything else. And that was her favorite character. And that really, it opened my eyes. It seems like such a small thing. And it is a small thing. I don't mean to make a huge deal out of it. I guess it didn't, alter the Earth's orbit or anything. But for me, it was a big deal, because it's like, oh, people really do like to see themselves in stories, and maybe I took that for granted, too much in my life. And so it's like, but even if, in addition to, hey, like Stan Lee always said, even if Marvel wasn't the best at it, it was kind of always trying to make it the world outside your window. And you definitely want to do that so people could relate. And so when you're doing an all ages book, pulling it together, that you say, hey, I want to, you have to make the adults relate. And I think a lot of ways you do that in children's literature is just to say, hey, I remember what it was like. I remember what I didn't understand when I was younger, and now that I'm older, I understand maybe my parents' my parents were right about something, or the world is either more black and white or more of a shade of gray. It can kind of go either way. And so I that is my kind of, if you look for anything like that, I put it in a simple thing like DuckTales. I put it in Moon Girl. I put it in everything I do. That kind of, perspective. So it's a conscious perspective of making, the older among us in the audience to remember what it was like to be a kid. And while you're doing that, it has the double benefit, or the double whammy of, oh, the kid that won't even get it, but it works out, and like I said, at the end of the day, if you have a cool booby trap protecting the treasure, it'll get you pretty far through the story, through the pages with the audience.
Yeah, for sure. So not to keep ping-ponging back and forth between DuckTales and Moon Girl, but right. You talked about, how it's important for people to see themselves in stories. And that reminded me, we were talking offline about how you saw the video of me putting these shelves together. Well, a year and a half ago, I did the same video when we moved into this house. And for the longest time, like all this art that's up on the wall now, I was afraid to hang it up because I just knew it wasn't going to be level, and I'm not a carpenter like my grandfather. So I was just like, if I don't put it on the wall, it won't be crooked and it won't bother me. So I had this one print of Nubia that was just sitting on the floor in front of my DC books. And my 5-year-old, who was not even 4 at the time, was just like enamored by that set. And she's just like, who is that? I'm like, oh, it's Nubia. And I'm like, you've never read a Nubia comic. I don't even have any Nubia comics to show you right now. But she just like was mesmerized by that print. And it kind of struck me like, oh, dang, like she's just like, okay, I see all of these guys in here, you know, I see Batman. I know who Batman is and Spider-Man, but like, who is that? Because that resonates with me. And so with that, I'm wondering how Lunella became a Black girl. Like, what was behind that decision?
Yeah, well, I didn't. So that was a visual design, so I really didn't have too much to do with it. But neither did Natasha Bustos, who, you know, she's mixed race, but you know, and she's Afro-Brazilian. She's also Spanish, so of color. But she didn't design it either. It was actually designed by Amy Reeder because it was just a design that she had sitting around. Kind of an older. She wanted to do. She put it like an Inspector Gadget, but older, and you know, and she kind of had that idea. And then Moon Girl came around. She says, "Oh, I can use this kind of design." So, you know, the initial of it was, you know, I don't mean to say that, you know, not a lot of thought was put into it. And I don't want to speak for Amy or Natasha because, like I said, they designed the character at the end of the day. But it was kind of, well, you know, you're going to create a new character. You know, let's you know just come up with something cool and fun, and maybe something that was underrepresented, but not really, you know, at least from my point of view, not something that was at first, you know, my first thought on it. But that being said, then Natasha Bustos, you know, came on board, you know, obviously early in the process because she did the first issue and she did all the designs. And, you know, if you see a picture of her at 9 years old, it's exactly the same as, Vanilla Lafayette. And so much of the, of course, expressions and acting and interactions and the family stuff, it's all Natasha. You know, like I said, I can't take credit for any of that except setting it up. And if you like the dialogue, I guess I can take credit for it. But no, it was just a design of like, we're going to make a new character. And then, you know, like I said, it wasn't, I don't think there was enough, you don't ever have enough pages in a book to tell the story of being a young Black girl in the Marvel universe. I don't think so. I mean, but and if I did have enough pages, I'm the last guy that would do it. You know what I mean? So, but you know, when something has longevity, when you get 47 issues, well, then you can do something like that. When you have a character that works, other creators can come in and do that type of stuff, and the cartoon, and again, just readers and watchers now of the film kind of dream all that stuff up. But it just started as again a visual design that started with Amy and then was refined by Natasha, and they put themselves into it to a certain degree. And then as and writing it, it's I don't set out. You can't be colorblind either, though, because then that doesn't make any sense, right? So a character is who she is, and you have to think of them as, you know, they have a history, they have a life that they live in, they have challenges, and they have you know, and things that they're proud of themselves, and all that other stuff. But that's, you know, it's hard to quantify how that goes into development of a character because it's so ethereal. Like sometimes if you ask me about it, you know, Brandon, how do you write a new character? It's like I tend to say, listen, you only need to think as much as you need to put on the page. You don't need to think too much past that. You know, I know, and I guess he says that at conventions, and I don't know him personally. You know, just maybe like I said, I saw this at a convention or sitting next to him on a panel. Like Rick Remender said, he had like I have like a 200 question questionnaire that he fills out before everything. It's like almost like a method actor would, you know. But that's not me. To me, it's just like, okay, what am I doing next? And again, space, page count, panel count is so precious that you have to make it about a girl and her dinosaur. But if you're doing it right, there's an authenticity that comes, and you know, there's certainly parts of me in everything I do, including Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. But as far as the decision to feature a young black girl was was just a product of the artists who designed her more than it was of me. But I hope we all did a good job, and I'm sure,
Yeah, I mean, she absolutely
yeah,
resonates.
yeah.
One of my good friends, Trevor Fernandez Linkevich, which I'm like, how pretentious of you to have two last names, so I have to say the whole thing every time. But he he's the founder of a Pocket Watch Press. He's been going viral on Instagram here lately, doing like different
Mm,
story and like writing tips. But he's got a book called Heavy, and he's I don't know what his ethnicity is actually, right? His name rhymes with Bill Sienkiewicz, so I'm just gonna assume he's Polish, right? But the, the, but he being a white guy decided to feature this black line cook in his story, and so I asked him like, hey, what was behind that decision? And he was just kind of like, why not?
yeah,
And some of the feedback that had been given was basically like, is this your story to tell? Like, in how can you put words in someone, whatever. And I was explaining to him, I'm like, I think, at least with his story, it's very much universal, right?
mhm,
Like, now, me being a black man, I might approach this universal theme a different way. Like, there might be some nuance that I can breathe into it,
right.
right? It's about this guy who's just kind of riddled by shame because his younger brother went missing at some
Hmm.
point, and
Right.
he hasn't quite gotten over it. And so I'm like, I don't think like anybody in that situation is going to react generally the same way, right? Like,
Right.
and I think most people who grow up in families grow up, learning, hey, you've got to, look out for your siblings, right? Like, y'all are all you have, and so on, right? Now,
Right.
me as a black man being raised in the South, with a grandmother who, grew up on a farm, it's like she's saying y'all look out for each other for different reasons than
Right.
maybe, your grandmother would, but it's the
Hmm.
same concept. So if
Right.
you have the dialogue, it's like, hey, make sure y'all stay together, or whatever, it doesn't matter why, because whoever's reading that story is going to read in the subtext to say, well, yeah, because that's how we all grow up, or what have you. And so I think it's interesting, like when someone, can put themselves in a different character shoes, especially in this, or different type of person's shoes, especially in this climate where it just feels like everything is so insulated, and, people are kind of in their echo chambers, and so on. And I think it makes for an interesting, for lack of a better term, product, and a more
Right.
interesting piece of art to consume,
Yeah.
when we kind of go through that exercise.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I don't know if any of it holds up in 40 years. So now so you're about 15 years younger than me, and you're going to get to a point where it's like, oh, I can't believe we did that back then. Even if it's not you, just that you kind of that's the world that you lived in,
Mm,
and 'cause, progress moves forward and leaves it leaves you behind if you don't go along with it to a certain extent, and in all good ways. But in another way, it always depends. You know what I mean? It's you can watch 16 Candles, which, an old 80s movie, and say, oh my God, like they've never let you film any of this today. And it's like, well, I think to some extent you have to say, well, at the time it was, you wouldn't have thought of it as bad, not because it was bad, but maybe you would have even thought, hey, it's progressive. I don't mean to take 16 Candles to anything.
yeah.
You can certainly take comic examples. Jack Kirby working on Black Panther, or Don McGregor working on Black Panther.
Mhm.
I don't think that, I think it's safe to say that there was no, you know, intention to be insensitive, but did they miss the mark? Everybody misses the mark as time goes by. But that being said, it is also important to, say, well, to stop missing the mark, or to get, all kinds of voices in there doing all kinds of different things. So I certainly try my best. I try not to worry about it too much, not because it's not important, but just because you know, time is gonna make us all wiser, hopefully, and being able, just that you get more stories, more of an audience, more people coming into it. That's important, but you also just have to balance that against, trying to learn something, to be smart and make room for the next guy or gal, whatever that may be. And I think, even fiction works that way. You said, let's, get more characters out there and see how much they can take off, like a Miles Morales, like you said, or like a Ms. Marvel.
Hmm.
It's great stuff. I remember when Ms. Marvel was new, I was in Jim Hanley's universe in Manhattan, and there was I don't know if she was Pakistani or Indian, South Asian girl came in looking for that book, and she didn't know anything about comics, but she kind of marched into the comic store. She was, a teenager and said, "I want this, and what's this?" And to grab it and buy it. And, maybe right now she's still a Ms. Marvel fan. Maybe she's a Moon Girl fan. Maybe she's a Ducktales fan. Maybe she's a Wolverine and Punisher fan. Maybe she's reading Saga, hopefully all that stuff. But even if it was just she bought one issue of Ms. Marvel and it meant something to her that day, that's nothing to sneeze at. So, like I said, a rising tide lifts all boats. So hopefully people get to do stuff. And, you know, comics is a collaborative medium. So you're going to have all different kinds of people working on all different kinds of books, and nobody's a monolith, and nobody's knows all the answers, and you could pick a million qualifications, and it just kind of gets thrown out there. And like I said, you do your best, but maybe this is a cop out. I don't know. I honestly don't. To me, I said, well, I'm just going to do a good story, but I don't think that's enough. But it's easy for me to say, so maybe that's not the right attitude. But it is something that I've kind of grown up with, and over the last 15 years, when people are more sensitive to stuff, especially over the last 10 years, well, I'll just do a good story and let the rest, work itself out, and try to always, be honest and be forthright. And I don't know, that's maybe very easy for me to say where other people can't. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think, you know, I talk to a lot of creators. I'm fortunate in that way. And everyone approaches it looking to tell the best story they can. There are certainly those who, may have some sort of a subtext they'd like to get across.
Right.
You know, my friend Stephanie Williams does a lot of sort of Easter eggs. Like I like to talk about the sort of warm hug moments that are in all of her comics, whether it's like some sci-fi time travel romp or like some like Southern Gothic horror. Like there are these quiet moments in all of those books that are just like almost like an if you know sort of nod, where it's like, okay, maybe everybody doesn't pick up this moment, but those who recognize it are like, oh wow, I feel seen. And I think, that's sort of a universal thing, right? Like that's no different than Che Grayson, who's doing Absolute Catwoman right now, talking about the different Easter eggs, like naming Catwoman's AI Jonesy from because she just loved, or they just loved the Aliens movies, right? And I think it's just the more that we or you all create sort of out of love, right? Whether it's love for the medium, love for just the adventure, the action, that you may have grown up with. I think people are going to feel seen. I don't know that anybody has to set out to, make the statement as Priest says, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and some people do set out to make these statements, or a fraction of a statement at least. And there's nothing. To say there's nothing wrong with that sounds like I'm diminishing it too much. It's a perfectly valid way to tell a story. It's anything that a reader is going to connect to is fair game in my book. So sometimes when when you appropriate something, you're like, oh, we don't need to be doing that. Or when you're pandering, you don't need to be doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, with any particular type of person or type of story. It's because that's, much like people looking out for each other is a universal story, a universal theme. So is pandering, and so is appropriation. I mean, it can come from all different angles,
Yeah.
and that's just that's ineffective, because you're put in my mind when you say I'm pandering, you're saying I'm putting something else before the story. Now,
Mhm.
but if your story depends on certain people getting it. That's how stories have always worked. I mean, that's how language works, right? Unless if we're not both speaking the same language, then we can't communicate, right? So,
Right.
to make it, everyone knows Darth Vader's a bad guy
Mhm.
when you see him, because he's giant, he has a helmet, he breathes heavy, he's got a red lightsaber, forget the fact that he's slicing and dicing people. I mean, you know right away he's a bad guy, and that's because of, I don't want to call it cliches, but that's kind of is. It's right. It's because of
The
motifs and
cues.
archetypes and everything else. Yeah, and you can't tell a story in any medium, especially not in comics. Comics are, like I said, you got to really keep that thing moving. People need to get it, and they need the cues, like you said. So if your cues are based on your own life, and you're a good writer or you're a good artist, of course that's great stuff to do. If your cues are based on the goofy action figures you used to play with in the bathtub, that's fine. That's fine too.
Yeah.
If it's it's as long as people don't feel, in the world, or just in the general comic audience, to keep it a little bit more on point, as long as people don't feel excluded,
Mhm.
then the business is doing something right, or let's say they feel less excluded, then the business as a whole is doing something right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there can be a fine line between like inclusion and like sort of being patronizing, right? Like
Right.
there's a few off color McDonald's commercials I'm sure they wish they could
Uh,
take back.
yeah.
But I think, you know, the overall point, I think whether the statement or the message is thesis or subtext, if it's in you, it's
Mm,
going to come out. I don't think there's anything
right.
wrong with expressing it, no matter what form that takes. Um,
No, when you're a creator, and writing, maybe more so than some of the other aspects of it, you're a product of your experiences. That's what differentiates you
mhm.
from the guy writing the other book next to you on the shelf. It's like you people don't go to school for it. People don't read a playbook for it and kind of learn basics. A writer is based on all of their experiences and everything they've read and everything they've thought. And that doesn't mean that a writer, when he writes something, is putting himself on the page per se, because we're all liars for as a profession. I'm going to make you care about something that's not real. Natasha Bustos is going to make you care about lines on a piece of paper, and you think it's real. Tommaso Randa on Ducktales is going to make you think that you care about ducks that are lines on paper. They're not even human, you
Yeah.
know? So you only can do that, like I said, if you embrace kind of artifice. And like I said, lying is a strong word, by say it to be provocative.
Mhm.
But that craft, of doing something is, again, you pull from your experience, you pull from who you are. And that's why diversity, whether it's with a capital D or a lowercase d, is important, because otherwise you don't have enough uh, critical mass to make a Marvel universe launch, or to make a comic book industry have a little bit of something for everybody. So you know, you hope everybody's pro diversity, but diversity is good business on top of being good, and good for creative energy on top of being just a general moral societal good. It's you have to, in order to survive,
Yeah.
keep a very broad batch of creators with a broad bunch of influences, and who are going to come up with new things, or steal the right thing, or remember the right thing and put it on the page. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And so speaking of diversity, to sort of wind things down on a light note,
Sure.
one thing I love about DuckTales as a property, and also your DuckTales comics, is
Thank you.
just the breadth of the world that they live in. There are so many different characters like that weave in and out. There's such a diverse cast, even though everyone's a duck or a dog or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So my question is, do you have a favorite sort of side character in DuckTales?
Yeah, and it's changed since I've written them, but I always liked, and there's one episode, and it's a real deep dive because it's like, yes, certain comic creators that are like me, and they give you an answer like this. They come up with the weirdest oddball thing that you can think of. So there was the little kid from the Junior Woodchucks, the Boy Scouts version, Doofus. He was really cool, but he only appears every maybe fifth or sixth episode, and I put him really feature him just about once in the story, but I really was happy to do it. But then with all the other characters, 12 issues is not as much room as you think because DuckTales is so big. So I said, well, when I was a kid, I used to, and I think everybody's favorite was Launchpad. You know what I mean? So Launchpad, I tried to say, okay, let's give them what they want and put more Launchpad in. Everybody loves Darkwing, but I wasn't allowed to use Darkwing because Darkwing is considered siloed. So
Yeah.
Darkwing, even though, and his origin's a little different in the '87 cartoon than it became in the spinoff, but you can't do Duckwing at all because Disney wants that to be a separate property
Yeah.
that doesn't involve. So I couldn't put Darkwing in. A character, and this is a roundabout way to answer it. So a character I thought I wouldn't like because I wasn't vibing with his design. It was and he's kind of just a cliche. Was Gizmo Duck, but now Gizmo Duck is absolutely my favorite one to write, and and not that I draw him, but it's like, oh, he's gonna be so cool with that one unicycle wheel and his goofy thing. And it's like, and and I hope, and so I put in Gizmo Duck. So I have my one Gizmo Duck issue. But then also like every time since then, when I say, okay, I need a page with some people from the town. Oh, it kept on going to Gizmo Duck and going to Gizmo Duck. And like, if Dynamite thought they ever wanted to do a Gizmo Duck miniseries, I'd be like, oh my God, let me do it. So it just changed because he's a goof on superheroes, because he's, like I said, it's such a challenge to move him around a page. But he has the alter ego, which is like he's like the accountant who's always making mistakes and doing stuff. He's got the bravado. It's like a perfect comic book. It's like, what was I thinking? This is the best character. I should be doing more of him. So Gizmo Duck. But again, if you asked me that 18 months ago, I would have said, I don't know, probably Launchpad or this, that, or the other thing. You know what I mean? Or
That's funny.
Doofus.
I was trying to decide if I was going to name mine first because I felt like you were going to take it, but it was definitely Gizmo Duck.
Oh, good. That's good. Well, there you go. So we would have totally disagreed. If we ever had that interview that we dreamed of having.
Right.
But now we're in alignment. So more Gizmo Duck would be pretty cool. And I think I think. I grew up with, like I said, like, with brothers, with male cousins and the family, and, hanging out when you're a kid, always with the different boys in the neighborhood. Um, and, but so I have two daughters. I said, oh, Moon Girl, I really like to do it. Oh, I'm doing some other projects. I like doing it. I worked on this thing with, Lalisa from Blackpink, and my daughter and our friends are going to love it. But I really wanted to do something. Not that boys don't read Moon Girl because plenty do, and not that girls don't read Ducktales because plenty do. But I really wanted to do something for, like I said, that's more of boys growing up and having adventures. And so I did Ducktales, and I said, oh, that's nice because if I'm ever sitting at a convention, or more likely if I'm ever sitting at a school after school program or a library or something like that, it's like, no, I think it's harder to get boys to read nowadays. So I was happy to put that out there. And Gizmo Duck is like, he said, I could see kids really flipping for him if you did that right.
He's exciting. The design is fun. He's fun. He's hilarious. Like you said, seeing him move around the page. You know what? I'm going to take out, I think it's issue 7 is his issue.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, maybe it's issue 8. By the way, I don't even remember the cover artist on these, but these DuckTales covers are all amazing.
Yeah, well, there's, Dynamite doesn't shy away from making a billion covers, but Ivan or Ivan or whatever, Bigorella
Bigorella.
is the he does the Mickey Mouse comic in Italy,
Hmm.
and he's in the, if you talk to Disney people, especially like I said, and all the artists are like from an Italian studio, because Italy Disney comics have been huge hits nonstop since
Hmm.
World War II. But Ivan Bigarella is like a Hall of Famer when it comes to Disney stuff, and he did a lot of covers. But he's doing them in advance, and they didn't always they more often than not didn't sync up with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't look for the Gizmo duck on the asteroid on the cover. But
But like, he's just fun.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
let's see, this other splash. Like,
yeah,
listen,
yeah,
I
yeah,
would
yeah. I mean,
buy
he's
a Gizmo Duck miniseries in a heartbeat.
all right. Well, hopefully, if the audience demands it, Daniel might have let me take a crack at it
Yeah.
because I've fallen in love with writing that character and seeing you just flip those pages open.
Mhm.
That's how I felt that way when I saw them for the first time because when I worked with certainly even from the beginning. When I worked on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, it was like, we were having fun. It was just like, me, I'd call up Natasha, email Natasha. She's over in Spain. So, it's not like I could walk across the street, but it was so much interaction of like layouts and the breakdowns and what do you want to do and all this other stuff. Um, with DuckTales, part of it because obviously it's a new team and you got to get used to it. And we're only on it for 12 issues. And then Disney has to come in and approve and everything else. It was so heavily dependent on the editor, Nate Cosby, making that all blend together
Mhm.
perfectly. But so when I saw the pages for any story, I was always amazed, like you are. And I said, oh my God, look what he did with Gizmo Duck. Like you said specifically, I really, as much as I enjoyed writing just to see those pages came in, I was like, oh, this really is magic. So Gizmo Duck is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I just built these shelves, and so part of the fun of having mostly empty shelves is filling them. And I
Sure.
figured with this back wall, I should try to keep them sparsely populated and do like some shelves that are like full of books, and then some that have got
Mhm.
like action figures and stuff.
Right.
So you actually can't see it from this angle. I wonder if I could see if I can change up real quick. Let's see. How's this going to look? All right. If I move this camera, oh, it's still going to be too short. But you guys can see at the very top left, you'll see Yoda, and that's my Disney Comics shelf, and it's mostly those Disney Afternoon Adventures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I was on eBay the other day, and I'm like, all right, I need like Disney Afternoon action figures, and I found a Gizmo Duck,
Mhm.
but the Gizmo Duck you would need a stand because he
Ah,
can't stand up because of the wheel, and I was like,
right,
oh.
right,
That makes all the sense in the world, and I see why there are not Gizmo Duck toys.
right. Yeah,
Except
yeah. Right.
NECA just announced they're doing a whole DuckTales line, and there
Oh,
is
wow.
a Gizmo Duck, and they kind of like sculpted like a little cloud on his
Yeah,
wheel
yeah,
that he
yeah, like a
stands
dust
on.
cloud. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that's amazing. As if I need to spend $35 for each DuckTales character, but I'm probably gonna do it because I'm a sucker.
Yeah, you see, because I've been moving around, so I'm, but you see that Hulk behind me.
Yeah.
I can't point. So yeah, older than I am, but I try to be very good about keeping it to books these days because
Uh,
like statues, forget about it, toys, forget about it, and I have more junk than an adult should have, but like I said, yeah, and empty shelf space gets filled up real fast, and but you see some of that stuff, man. Some of those toys are $35 is a lot of money, but man, that stuff you'll love it forever when you see that. You know what I mean? So it's like it's tempting, but I try not to go
I saw a
down
big
that road.
bird in Target today, and I'm
Oh,
like, oh, I never thought I would need an articulating big bird
yeah,
action figure,
yeah,
but
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
I left it
yeah.
on the shelf. I was good today.
Well,
But speaking of leaving things on shelves, you guys should
right.
not leave these DuckTales comics on the shelf. As of time of recording, you got about 15 days left, which means you might have a week by the time this goes live to grab these classic DuckTales comics. Now, if you are particularly interested in Brandon's run of DuckTales, that would be collected in volume 5, which you can get in a softcover for, I believe, $35. The hardcover, the standard edition, comes in at $45. Or you can go all out. You can get the sort of special edition hardcover that is signed for $80. Now, again, there are 5 different volumes of DuckTales available. We've got, whoops, I hit the mic. That's an amateur move. But we've got the Gladstone years. We've got the Disney Comics publishing era. And then we've got the revival, the DuckTales revival from the early 2010s. Like I said, I believe that is the Boom Studios
IDW.
era.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Boom. You're right.
And then volume 4 is the 2017 reboot. That goes through IDW.
IDW, right.
And then finally we get to Brandon's volume 5, which, first of all, even just looking at these page counts, like you have one of the longer DuckTales runs. Like, how does that feel?
Yeah, yeah, well, that was cool. And when I said when I say 12 is enough when I get started. I said the same thing on Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and then you want to just keep doing it, because it's working so well, which is a great sign. But yeah, so like for $35 for the trade, it collects 10 issues, and the issues are $4.99 a pop now. So it's actually a really good deal. You look at that Kickstarter, you might get overwhelmed and say, well, do I want to drop a few $100s on a box set and everything else? And it's all good stuff because it's tons of page counts, like you said, and it's stuff that's no longer in print, and some of the stuff has never been reprinted in that collection. If you're a comic fan in the know, and you know how hard it is to get some of that stuff like Darkwing and everything else that they finally reprinted, or the Gargoyle stuff that they reprinted with the new stuff. It's nice to have it all, and it's nice to have it in a nice big fancy edition that might take up a lot of shelf space. But maybe, like I said, if you're buying it for a 10-year-old, maybe you just want to buy a $35 trade, but 35 for that many pages, because it's 12 issues, and trades now are hardly ever 6 or 4 or 5 issues, or it's the same price as getting at least 2 books worth of stuff. Meaning collected editions worth of stuff. So you really can do real well for yourself with the Kickstarter. They have all kinds of, like I said, mixing and matching that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's 2,000 pages all in if you get everything.
Yeah,
but mine's about 250, and it's a nice long. It's a substantial run these days, and I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be a part of it because. It really, I like everything, but I also love doing give me an 8-page story about strawberry shortcake. Not that I know anything about strawberry shortcake, but it'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, 8 pages. That'd be so cool. I don't have to worry about it, and I'll come up with something. But to do a nice long run, it's harder and harder these days. And 12 would be considered a short run maybe when I was a kid growing up and doing stuff, but. Yeah. I like being able to keep like I said, keep with the character. It's a lot of fun.
For sure. So yeah, this might be the longest DuckTales run we get until absolute DuckTales. But we've got this 5 volumes that you can grab. If you purchase either set of the hardcovers, you will get a free slipcase that goes along with it. It's got that beautiful Ivan Bigarella art from Brandon's DuckTales run on the outside of it. And they've got these connecting spines, which I didn't even notice until I was just looking at this mock-up. And now I'm like, dang, like now I kind of have to get them. It's so bad. So bad.
Yeah. No, it's like I said, so when I was working at Vertigo, they would always be reprinting stuff and doing new printings, right? Whether that's Hellblazer, where there's a million issues, or Sandman, or all the different runs of stuff. And they're very conscientious, like, oh, we'll do a new spine, because that way people will have to buy all of the editions in that way. But I've never been that way, and I'm kind of proud that if you look on my shelf at some big run that I even collected in trade paperback. They're all messed up and mixed up, and they're all different. I got one hardcover edition versus the soft cover, and it's like I said the you know the reissue design stuff. I kind of like that such because the contents inside are all the same, but maybe I'm just deluding myself, and I really do want the giant, beautiful shelf spine display.
Listen,
So
at this point, I got the Darkwing set. I've got the Gargoyle set. I
there you
don't
go.
think there's a world in which I don't get the Ducktales set to go along with it, but my wallet won't be happy about it.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's a lot of reading and a lot of good stuff. The wallet, if for some reason the wallet gives you, lets you off the hook, your shelves are going to be unhappy, right? Because it's just it's going to take up a whole
Yeah,
section.
that's true.
But
Hey, it'll be pretty. I know exactly where it's gonna go. I've got stuff up there that's just straight up placeholders. Like it's not gonna stay there, but it looks cool for now. But when the real stuff gets here,
I'm in my place where I got all my books. I'm double depth now, so I got like extra deep bookcases.
Oh yeah,
But I got to go one behind the other, which works because a lot of things are runs of stuff. So it could be okay if it's 6 trades, I have 3 and then 3 behind it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I have a friend who's that way, but he's like turned his shelves sideways, so they look like library aisles.
that's cool. Like, yeah, I like that. I like that.
That I'm like, I don't know that I would do it because I have to put my stuff on camera. So I'm like, where am I going to sit?
Yeah.
But that's an interesting use of space.
Paul Levitz, who's been around forever, he was the publisher at DC Comics, but wrote Legion of Superheroes and a million other things over the years. Sometimes he's on a podcast interview, and I look and I see behind him in his office, he's got the crank. You know what I'm talking about? It's like so it's like one, so there's only like one gap, so he can move the shelves like exactly like an old school like a reference library would be or something like that. I said that's hardcore. It's got the big wheel, so you can move it across. So people would want to see him going through his shelves and turning the wheel left and right. But
listen,
I don't think he's got the
to that YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. Someone should clue him in, and so you should just be organizing his shelves all day long, and people would watch it.
Criterion's Closet, but it's just Paul picking up one book off his shelf.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Well, look, Brandon, you've been super gracious with your time, and so gracious that we even imagined a whole separate interview. So somewhere in the ethos, there's another hour of us yakking it up.
That's right. Somewhere in the space-time continuum.
Right. But thank you for doing this. Thank you for your run on DuckTales and everything else you've done. I'm excited to see what comes next. And for those of you who want to relish a little bit more in what has already been, check out this run of DuckTales. It's available on Kickstarter. You can go to comicsaredope.com/DuckTales because I care about you and I don't want you to have to remember some long Kickstarter tag. So comicsaredope.com/DuckTales. That'll get you to the campaign. It's fully funded. It's going to deliver. You just need to go ahead and secure your stuff before the time runs out or you won't have it. And with that, thanks again, Brandon, for your time. Thank you, viewer, listener, reader, for your time. And I'll see you guys in another one soon. Till then, stay safe, stay awesome, and read something dope today. Peace.